morning, boys and girls. It's really nice to have you watching in this morning. My name's Alistair and you're very welcome to my house. If you've been with us over these last few weeks, you will know that we've been thinking about the 10 Commandments, those 10 special laws or rules that God gave his ancient people and which apply to us as well today. The first one said, don't worship any other gods but me. The second one said, don't make any idols. The third one says, don't misuse my name. And today we come to the fourth one. And it says, remember the Sabbath, a day every week set apart to rest with God rightly. Let me read you the whole command as we find it written down in Exodus chapter 20. And this is what God says. Remember to observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days a week are set apart for your daily duties and regular work, but the seventh day is a day of rest, dedicated to the Lord your God. On that day, no one in your household may do any kind of work. This includes your sons and daughters, your male and female servants, your livestock, and any foreigners living amongst you. For 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and everything in them. Then he rested on the seventh day. That is why the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and set it apart as holy. So if we're going to understand what the Sabbath day is all about, we have to go right back to the very start of the Bible when God created the world. On day one, God created light and dark, the night and day. On the second day, he created the sky. On the third day, God made the sea and the dry land, as well as all the trees and plants that grow on dry land. On the fourth day, God made the sun, the moon, and all the stars. On the fifth day, God made lots of fish to swim in the sea and birds to fly in the sky. And on day 6, God made all the animals, but he also made the first human beings, Adam and Eve. And on the seventh day, well, God did something a little bit surprising. It says, the Bible, that God rested on the seventh day. Now, God didn't rest because he was tired, because our God is all powerful and he never gets tired and he never gets sleepy. God rested because his work was done and because he wanted to teach his people and to teach us that it was really important and a really good thing that we don't work all the time, that we take time to make sure that we get rest, and very especially that we take time to spend time with God and learn from him, to talk to him and to listen to him. And for the Jewish people, that day became known as the Sabbath day. And it's the sort of equivalent to what we call Sunday. And we're told to keep the Sabbath day holy. And that really means different. Does that mean we have to sit around all day with really big, long, glum faces looking miserable? Or does it mean that we have to get dressed up in our very best clothes and sit and think great thoughts? Well, I don't think so. Let me tell you what it was like when I was a small boy. Now, I know that was hundreds of years ago, but a long, long time ago. And my parents were really quite strict. And there was an awful lot of things that I wasn't allowed to do on a Sunday. I did have to get dressed up in my Sunday clothes to go to church. I wasn't allowed to watch television. I couldn't do any schoolwork. I wasn't allowed outside to play with my friends. I wasn't allowed to do any shopping. There was only certain books that I was allowed to read. And there was lots of other things that I wasn't allowed to do. In fact, in many ways, I didn't really enjoy Sunday because it seemed to me that there was lots and lots of things I wasn't allowed to do. But I want to say two things. One is that I learned some really good habits because of that. And secondly, it's really only looking back that I start to understand what my parents were trying to teach me. And in a few minutes, I want to tell you a story about some people who, when they met Jesus, and Jesus did something on the Sabbath day, they didn't get it either, and they didn't understand what was going on. But that's in a moment or two. I want to tell you a story. It's a story that took place in church. Well, a synagogue, which was a Jewish church, and it happened on the Sabbath day. And they had a very special preacher that particular Sabbath day because Jesus was there, and the synagogue was full. It was full of lots of people who just loved to listen to what Jesus was going to say. They just loved to hear his sermons and his talks because they just made so much sense. But also in the synagogue that day were some people called Pharisees. Now, Pharisees were men who were very, very religious and who took their religion extremely seriously. And they did their absolute best to obey the commands. And when it came to the fourth command, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy, they worked incredibly hard to make sure that they kept it holy. And in fact, they had no less than 39 different categories of rules and regulations of things that they weren't allowed to do on the Sabbath day. And not only were they really strict themselves, but they were always trying to make sure that everybody else followed these rules as well. And there was another person in the synagogue that morning, a woman who was very sick. The Bible tells us that she was bent double, and for 18 years she had been walking around and hadn't been able to straighten her back, and all that she could do was to look at the ground the whole time. And Jesus saw her in the synagogue, and he called her forward to the front. And the Bible tells us that he stretched out his hands and he touched the woman. And immediately she was able to stand up straight. And for the first time for 18 years, she was able to look people straight in the eye. Now, you would think that everybody would be absolutely delighted. The woman was thrilled to bits, and lots of the people were thrilled, both because it was a fantastic miracle to see, and some knew this woman and just knew what a change it was going to make in her life. But these Pharisees, remember the very religious people I told you about, they were not happy at all. And they started saying, why on earth did you do this on the Sabbath day? Don't you know that there are 6 days in which you're allowed to work? You could have waited until tomorrow before you healed this woman. Imagine people telling Jesus how he ought to keep the commands. And they got really cross and said that Jesus had done something completely wrong. And Jesus said to them, really, you're being very hypocritical. Really, you've absolutely missed the point. Because God didn't give us all these commands just to follow all sorts of rules and regulations. And God wants us to keep the commands. And Jesus said very clearly that when he was on earth, that he was here to make sure that people knew how to keep the commandments and the laws of God. But he wanted people to do that because they loved God, and to realize that they couldn't just please God by keeping lots of rules and regulations. And these Pharisees had completely missed the point about what the fourth commandment was about and about what Jesus was talking about. Remember, I said that I had a very strict upbringing and that I had missed the point somewhat in what my parents were trying to teach me. And I thought it was just to do with rules and regulations rather than doing things that please God. So we need to think a little bit about what this all means for us living today. And we'll do that in a moment or two. I want you to think about the scariest person you know. I'm sure that the teachers in your school are really nice, and I'm sure your headmaster or headmistress, you like them because they're really good people. But imagine that they're very, very strict, And one day you're running in the corridor and the headmaster comes out of his office and shouts at you in his loudest, scariest voice to stop running in the corridor. You'll do that, won't you? You'll do that because you're scared of him. Perhaps you're even scared that if you don't stop, that you'll be punished. And you know, some people think God's like that God's sitting up in heaven just waiting for us to do wrong things so that he can punish us. But God's not like that, because God really loves us. And the reason that he gave us rules and regulations and commandments was for our own good, to help us to grow, to help us to be safe. And so he gave us this particular commandment, telling us how important it was to rest and to make sure that we look after our bodies. Now, I want you to use your imagination again of someone that you really love, someone that really loves you, perhaps a grandparent or a friend of the family, and you're doing something wrong, and they say, stop that. You'll stop, not because you're scared, not because you're worried about what punishment you're going to get, but because you know that this person loves you and wants the best for you. And that's what God's like. So God really wants the best for us. So when he orders us or instructs us or commands us to do something or not to do something, it's for our own good. So what might it look like to keep the Sabbath day holy in 2020? Well, here's a few things that I think we should think about. I think it's a really good thing if we don't do schoolwork and work on a Sunday, and that we actually plan our week as carefully as possible so that we get all our schoolwork done on a Friday night or a Saturday so that we don't have to worry about it on a Sunday. I think it's a good idea not to go shopping on a Sunday. And there are 6 days in which we can do that. And sometimes there are emergencies when we have to do it. But it's a good idea if we don't go shopping on a Sunday. I think it's great if Sunday can be a different day, a day that we spend more time with our families, a day in which we certainly go to church and we go to the Ark and we enjoy listening to stories about Jesus and about God. And that's all part of it. But also taking time during the rest of the day just to be quiet for a little while. Maybe not to play so much on all our Xboxes and so on, or to watch as much television, so that we have just a little bit more time to listen to what God might be saying to us. So God's not looking down, waiting to see if we're going to do all sorts of things, but he really does want us to spend a wee bit more time with him. He really does want us to have a day in the week which is just a little bit different, when he is the main focus of all that we do and say. Now, it's all quite hard. And what I would suggest you do when we're finished here, maybe having done whatever craft there is to do, that you have a conversation with your mums and dads and you just ask each other, both of you, all of you, this same question. What can we do to make Sundays different? What can we do to make Sundays holy? And what can we do to concentrate on God so that Sunday is a different day from the rest of the week, and a day in which we really know what it is to follow and listen to and to trust God? So, our fourth commandment: remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy, a day when we can have rest, a day which is different from the rest of the week. Thanks so much for listening in, and I hope you have a really good week.